The essence of human freedom is the freedom of people to make their own decisions so long as they don't interfere with the freedom of others. But that makes clear why private markets are so closely related to human freedom. Private markets are the only mechanism that permits a complex, interrelated society to be organized from the bottom up and not from the top down. The comparison between a free market on the one hand and an army on the other brings it out. In a military setting, the general commands, the colonel tells it to the major tells it to the captain, and so on down the line, until the private jumps to attention. In an economic market, it's the other way around. The consumer goes to the store and buys the toothpaste or doesn't, and that order gets sent up the line until it affects what toothpastes are produced and ultimately how they're produced. Those are the only two ways you can organize society, from the bottom up or the top down. We're here in Claremont University, Claremont College, and a university is a good example of what's organized from the bottom up. In this case, it's the teachers up, not the students. But the fact that that's the case, that a free markets, economic freedom depends on cooperation among millions of people, voluntary cooperation, also makes it clear why free markets are so rare, why free societies are so rare. Make no mistake about it, we have been born in a relatively free society and have lived in a free society, and so we take it for granted. But yet there's been no time in history, including the present, when the great majority of the human race has lived in free societies. So free markets are very rare. Free societies are very rare. And the reason it is because they restrain power. Restrain power for both bad people and good people. In a free society, you have to get voluntary cooperation. The consumer is the ultimate boss. And in such a society, bad people find it hard to get what they want, but so do good people. Most interventions in government are not by bad people. Most government interventions are originally made by good people seeking to do good, who know what's good for the population better than they individually do. If they trusted the individual values, they'd let them proceed through a free, voluntary cooperation. But they know that the people are foolish, that they're not going to save enough for their retirement, that they're not going to get the railroads from keep the railroads from charging them too much, and so on. So almost all interventions, not all, perhaps tariffs are a good example of some that are not, but most interventions are from good people who want to do good. But once violence and force is introduced to achieve something, it gets taken over by bad people and becomes an instrument for doing harm. Every regulatory authority, from the Interstate Commerce Commission to the Food and Drug Administration to you name it, has initially, almost everyone has initially been established for good reasons. But once it's established, there's a pot of money there, and people are going to go after it. And the Interstate Commerce Commission is going to come under the control of the railroads. The FDA is going to come under the control of the drug industry, and so on down the line. What this suggests, to put it in more technical economic terms, is that a free society may be an unstable equilibrium position. By chance or otherwise, it can get established. But it's very hard to maintain it, because if you push it, it tends to go in one direction. If you expand government, it tends to stay expanded. The hardest thing in the world is to get something undone. You go back in history and name the government activities that have been closed down, and there are very few and far between. Alcoholic prohibition of alcohol is one example. And there are 2 or 3 other examples, but it's very hard to find cases in which the role of government has been rolled back. You can find many cases where it's been expanded. And the reason is simple, along the same lines. Those activities have come into the hands of people who benefit a good deal from them. And each of those people has a strong interest in keeping it there. On the other hand, the costs are spread broadly among the population at large. And individual citizens don't have an incentive to operate against them. You know, people say that, well, we have majority rule. Really, the difficulty in cutting down government, they say, is that people want all the goodies that government gives. But they don't. That's a bunch of nonsense. Does everybody in this room want to pay twice the world price for sugar? If that were put to a vote, do you think it would be approved by the American people? But Archer Daniel Midlands thinks we ought to pay twice as much for sugar. And we do. So I don't believe it's true for a second that we have so much government because people have such demands upon government. We have so much government because once you get started in an area, it becomes a preserve of the people who can best take advantage of it, and they have a far greater interest in maintaining it than the population at large has in destroying it. The minimum wage rate, which is coming up now, is another very good example. It's there is no doubt that it has the effect of increasing unemployment and making it difficult for people who have very little skill to get hold of the first rung of the ladder. But why do we have it? Because the trade unions benefit greatly from it, and they are the ones who insist on having it.